welcome back to my channel. This is Angelica with the MathMagician Services, and I wanted to go over how to handle taking on a new client. In one of my last videos, I talked a little bit about the onboarding process, and now I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth of what happens whenever I first get into someone's QuickBooks account. So we're going to go over just a few things that I usually like to check for. I touched on this a little bit in the last video. Like I said, we're going to go more in depth on this. So we're going to be looking at some items to pay attention to whenever we're perusing through their QuickBooks. Before we really start anything, you may send them a quote and think that everything is fine, and come to find out there's a little bit of cleanup work to do. When this is the case, I usually will tell them that there is, I will charge hourly for that cleanup work if they're interested. And if not, I will try to estimate how much cleanup work is actually needed and then send them a flat rate based off of that. And then that's kind of treated like a deposit, and I'll usually have them pay me right off the bat for those items, because those are going to take a long time and you need to be compensated for that. So these are items that I like to pay attention to. Number 1 is transactions to categorize. 2 is reconciliation history. 3 is the balance sheet. 4 is uncategorized transactions. 5 is liability and asset information. 6 is undeposited funds. 7, accounts receivable and payable. And there's probably a few other odds and ends in there, but these are the ones that I really like to look at the most. So let's talk about the first one. Transactions to categorize. So we want to pay attention to the amount of items that need to be categorized. When was the last time an item was categorized? Are there any items sitting in excluded? So we're going to go ahead and show you a real life example of what this looks like in QuickBooks. Okay, so I just took this client on a little over a week and a half ago, and I tried to create another video, but unfortunately it didn't save. But I'm just going to go over some items here. So we can see this account here. It's got 23 items that need to be categorized. This one has 82. And so it's probably been a while since everything was done. So we can see here, February was probably about the last time that this was done. And for example, though, the other account that was sitting there it's been since January of this year. So technically this is kind of incorrect because there have been other items that were categorized. I actually had to go back through last week and do a few things. And this one is interesting because basically this is something that I want to explain to you guys do not do. One of the reasons he came to me is the bookkeeper that he was using. They kept taking everything from Venmo and Cash App, and that's what he was using to pay his contractors. And she kept categorizing everything, made a rule that everything that came out of Venmo and everything that came out of Cash App directly went to contractors. Yes, this is true, but he wanted those contractors to be specified in the payee section. And there were a lot of things that were just, as soon as they came through, automatically transferred into the contractors category and not having a payee. So this is important because at the end of the year, whenever you're sending out your 1099s, you want to make sure that you have as much information in there for each possible contractor, each 1099 worker that you have, because you want to know exactly what you need to send them for a 1099. So anyways, this has been done the last time probably around January. So it's going to take a little bit of cleanup work. We're in June right now, almost July. So that's at least 5-6 months of work that's going to have to be done. So that's what I'm talking about there. And then we can even go up and look at excluded. So we'll click on excluded. And there are 2 items sitting in here. And these are actually accurate. I went through these and made sure that these were accurate. At least the Venmo one is. I'm not sure about the Mercury one. I'll have to double check that. Usually if something's sitting in excluded, it means that a duplication came over and you don't need to have a duplicate transaction. And that's what happened with the Venmo one, is there was a duplication that had actually got transferred over. So I put that in excluded. But if you see a bunch of stuff sitting in excluded, question that. Figure out, why is this excluded? If you're missing transactions, it could be sitting in the excluded file whenever you're looking to reconcile something. So that's just what I like to look for whenever I'm thinking of categorizing things for a few people. I usually ask everyone whenever I do the consultation, how many transactions do you say you have per month? And they might give me a shortlisted number. This actually really gives me a good idea whenever I go back through categorized and I can see, okay, for the whole month of May, this is actually what came out of that account. So you may actually have to contact them and be like, hey, there is way more transactions listed here than what you initially let on. So I think that we may need to discuss changing the price because there's going to be a lot more time involved with that. Alrighty, so now we're going to talk about reconciliation history. You want to check to see if the accounts listed have ever been reconciled, and then whenever they have been, click on that reconciliation history and see if there are any changes or errors. So I'm going to show you what this looks like in real time on an actual QuickBooks account as well. All right, so we can see here that this main checking account, the last time it was reconciled was February 28th. So that's been several months that that's taken place. And his regular bookkeeper should have been keeping up with it. If we look, though, at history by account, this kind of gives us a little bit more. There was actually an account that I had done a while back that everything looked okay. It was reconciled. Everything was matching up great. And then I looked back at history by account because I noticed that the balance in the balance sheet was off from what was actually in their bank. And there was a whole bunch of stuff dating back 2 years prior in the reconciliation history that needed to be corrected. And the previous bookkeeper just put in a bunch of journal entries to make it work. And those journal entries were still incorrect. So that was a lot of cleanup. So we're going to click on history by account and see what this looks like. This one has actually only been done once. And what's even weirder about this is that this account was actually opened in January. And so I don't know why it starts off reconciling in the end of February when technically they should have been reconciling it from the moment that account was opened. It should have been January 1st to January 31st is the first month that's been reconciled, and then February. So I'm not quite sure why this is the case, but that is going to have to be changed. We'll probably have to undo it so that we can go back a little bit further and then reconcile January forward. But if there were changes or errors, you would see right here, it would say an amount that it's been changed by. Let's look at some of the other accounts and see if there's anything else that we can find. All right, so here's a good example for y'all, but it kind of sucks for me because I got to be the one doing the work. But this one was reconciled for January, which is great. But look at all of these changes, guys. These are all items that have either been undone or just not done correctly. Maybe there's duplication amounts that just suddenly got put in there. Maybe someone entered in things manually after the fact, but that is a lot of changes that happened. That is what it should be, and that is the amount of changes that have taken place since. And honestly, it could be part of me going back through a bunch of the Venmo and Cash App things. It's probably more so the case that I've done this. I knew I was going to have to go back and re-reconcile it anyway because I needed to recategorize those items, but still, that is a lot of stuff. And if you actually view on the report, we can actually see what went wrong. So I blurred this because I want their privacy to be protected, and there's a bunch of like contractor names on here, but this whole section right here, this whole section are items that were deleted. I did not go through and delete anything. I just changed who the payee was, and that shouldn't affect anything in QuickBooks as long as I didn't actually change who, or as long as I didn't actually delete the payment or anything. So this is definitely going to be some digging that I'm going to have to do, and maybe I'll take y'all on that journey with me whenever it comes time for me to clean that up. But these are items that I really like to look at because I'm trying to keep my client informed and go, hey, there is a lot more work here than meets the eye. And I have actually already gone over this with this client, and he has agreed for me to do hourly work to clean this up. And so we're just kind of taking it week by week to figure out a little bit more of his situation. But yeah, so a lot of changes, not quite sure what the previous bookkeeper was doing. But guys, this is why it's really important to pay attention to what you're doing and to not just go do things willy-nilly, and know that if you do end up deleting things or making changes, that it is going to affect how your reconciliations are. So keep that in mind. So now let's talk about the balance sheet. So your balance sheet is going to show you all your assets, liabilities, owner's equity, all that good stuff. You want to make sure that the items on the balance sheet match the ending date amount for the bank statements. If you happen to have those bank statements already, then that's great. You should already have them if you're doing reconciliations. But whenever you're doing a reconciliation, you also want to make sure that, let's say for the end of May, so May 31st, the amount was like $3,500. You want to make sure that in the balance sheet, it also says $3,500, because whenever this company goes to get a loan pulled or anything like that, that lender is going to want to look at this balance sheet. They're going to want to see what their assets and liabilities already are. And if their assets are off, then they're going to go, what the heck is happening? So you want to make sure that these reports are accurate and up to date so that your client is aware, and whenever they're doing lending or anything else like that, everything is good and just ready to go for them to do those things. Take a glance at ARAP and also at the amount of the liabilities and assets listed. So that kind of goes hand in hand. So I'm going to show you again what that looks like. See the assets here, these bank accounts. This you can't see because it's blurred out, but it is negative 4,000. I know this account is not in the negatives, so that is going to take some looking into in QuickBooks and seeing what the heck happened there. And then in accounts receivable, we see $10,000 is sitting there. Is that accurate? I don't know. We'll go over that in the next section. Undeposited funds. This is something else we're going to go over. $8,000 sitting there of undeposited funds. So that's no bueno. We're going to be looking at liabilities. There's no liabilities listed, so that either means they don't have a loan, or they're really just caught up and really good on their accounts payable. But we would like to double check that and make sure that there are in fact no loans or anything else that the company is lending money to. So yeah, you want to double check that and make sure. All right, so uncategorized transactions. So you want to look under uncategorized assets, uncategorized expenses, any other nondescript chart of account to see if there's any items listed in uncategorized. If there are, talk to the client, figure out where these belong. If you already know where they go, recategorize it. I know whenever I use Keeper, it helps a lot with identifying these uncategorized transactions. There's like a whole little section that legitimately shows you everything in uncategorized transactions, and you can click on them and then directly ask the client, hey, what is this? So it's super helpful. That's the bookkeeping software that I use to help me manage my clients' information. If you're interested, I do have a discount code to help you. I think it's for the first 12 months that you use it. You get a percentage off for every client that you put in Keeper. So if you're interested in that, I'll have that in the link down below. But any hoodles, let's go ahead and look at uncategorized transactions, and I can show you kind of what I'm talking about. So looking back at this balance sheet, we see uncategorized asset has 0. That's good. That's what we want to see. We don't want anything to be listed on uncategorized, because whenever it goes to the tax accountant, it's going to be really hard for them to know what to deduct if things are just listed uncategorized. There may be some things listed as miscellaneous that are honestly just kind of miscellaneous items, but if you can, at any cost, just try to figure out a account to put that information in. That will really help the tax accountant know what category or what deductions go with that specific item. So let's go ahead and actually look in the chart of accounts and see any other uncategorized items and see if there's anything else. So this is uncategorized income, and there are 2 items here that came from Square that are uncategorized items. So we'll actually have to ask him and figure out what this is. What did it go to? What invoice did this belong to? I almost guarantee you that this is probably going to match something in undeposited funds, but that's why we're going to go through that a little bit more. But this is why it's so important to check this, is because this is income. You always want to know where your money is coming from. Even if you have several different income accounts, even if they have several ways that they like to track their income of for instance, my husband does pressure washing. If he wants to track it from, okay, this is income from gutter cleaning. This is income from actual pressure washing. This is income from roof washing, stuff like that. Even if they have that set out, that's really important to know how the business is maintaining and working and where they should put more advertising power into. Why it's always important to make sure that you're looking at this stuff, because it all comes back to how the client is going to be able to function in their business. All right, so now we're going to talk about liabilities and assets. We kind of covered on this a minute ago in the balance sheet, but we want to check the liabilities and assets that are listed, confirm with your client that the items listed are correct, try to get liability account information, make sure there's an original purchase / entry listed for each liability. So this client actually doesn't have any liabilities, They're a fairly new business, and so they don't have any loans, but I'm going to show you with a company that does have a few loans and what you want to make sure that you have for each of those items. All right, so we see this account here. These are the assets. So this is the vehicle, this is the depreciation, and so you want to make sure that if you have an asset, or if you have a liability, that you also usually have an asset for these items. So like this is vehicles. You want to make sure that these assets are listed here. But then on the flip side, like I said, you're going to have your liabilities listed. So let me scroll down and show you. So here are the liabilities. You can see they are the same thing. This just shows what their monthly payment usually is. But I'm going to show you inside the register and what we want to be looking at for this, because this is really important to know. We can see that this is the original cost. This actually goes to the assets section. This is the liability. So you want to make sure that those are going, kind of canceling each other out, showing that this is debited towards the asset, this is credited towards the liability. But whenever it comes to making monthly payments, we want to make sure that it is going into the liability account. So basically what you're trying to do is just make sure that whenever they're keeping track of how much is left that they owe, like the original purchase price on this was like $50,000. Now they only owe $43,000. So it's really nice for them to know. And then whenever it comes to the tax accountant at the end of the year, being able to know what all is there. And then again, if they wanted to get something from another lender, they would have this information here and they would go, okay, I see that you're doing this. You have these assets, but you also have this much in liabilities, and that can kind of, differentiate on their decision. But these are things that are important to look at when it comes to assets and liabilities and making sure that they're set up correctly. All right, now we have undeposited funds. So undeposited funds can be kind of tricky, but basically the way I look at it is a type of desk drawer that's used to acknowledge payments that have not yet been deposited. I always say that let's pretend that someone gave you a check for an invoice and you're going, okay, great, Bob paid me for that invoice that he owed. And so you set that in your drawer in your desk, and then you get a few more checks throughout the day, other payments that have come in. You sit those in the desk drawer. So undeposited funds is kind of like that desk drawer, because at the end of the day, you're going to take all those checks and then you're going to go to the bank and deposit them. And then that deposit will come through QuickBooks, and then you can match that up to the actual payment that comes through. Undeposited funds is basically that holding drawer, that desk drawer, holding account, whatever you want to call it. Payments to deposit, I've seen that set in there, but it's all in all undeposited funds. So what I like to do is click bank deposit to see if there's any payments that have not been matched to a deposit. And if left unattended, this can create duplications in the account, and we do not want that. So I'm going to show you what this looks like firsthand. All right, so now we're sitting in the bank deposit screen, and anything sitting in undeposited funds is going to be in this screen, because whenever you're going to make a bank deposit, it's going to show you all the items that have been paid that are sitting in that desk drawer. Right off the bat, tell me if you notice something wrong, because there are 5-6 transactions that are completely wrong, and I don't know why they were ever put in here. But that is these journal entries. I don't know why a journal entry is sitting in here in undeposited funds, but it should not be. We do want to see, however, payments. That is what we want to see. So we can see some that started in May. That's great. We're going to scroll all the way to the bottom, though, and see how far back this goes. So we have this going all the way back to January, which, like I said, the accounts were created in January. Pretty much this QuickBooks account was open in January. So this goes back several months. We can see there's some refunds in here. We're going to have to figure out what the situation is with that. So it's going to be a decent amount of cleanup work. There's literally 2 pages worth here. $10,000 sitting here that's been technically paid but hasn't been put to a deposit yet. And so we don't want that sitting here. We don't want that looking like that. So what we usually have to do is go back in time a little bit, find these actual deposits, and then figure out how many payments go in that. Because like I said, it could be several checks that encompass one deposit, a bulk amount of checks to encompass one deposit. And that's where it can be kind of tricky. But if you have your due diligence, if you have someone that is willing to cooperate with you, if you have access into someone's bank account and they are able to actually show you, like, on the actual deposit, all the checks, all the money that was deposited with it, then that's going to be super helpful in knowing that. But don't just wing it. Try to do your best. I know it's frustrating, but trust me, it's going to pay off. Everything's going to be so much nicer. You're not going to be leaving a mess for everyone else. It just takes a little bit of time, and you're going to have to know that, and your client's going to have to understand that as well. All right, last one, accounts receivable / accounts payable. So we already kind of talked about this a little bit as well, but we want to look over what is owed in accounts receivable, accounts payable. Accounts receivable, of course, being what is owed to you. Accounts payable is what you owe someone else. It may be wise to print this off and show your client to confirm if payments have or have not been made for each of these clients. There may be certain things that, yes, they are actually, that is the number that is accurate for that specific client. They haven't paid and God knows when. And you may even want to say, if you're wanting to, for an extra price, I can kind of be your accounts receivable rep and just make these people accountable for paying you and stay on them. If you're having struggles. So that's something that you might be able to upsell to your people, to your clients. But if not, it's good to just know, hey, this is the actual appropriate amount. So let's go ahead and look at this in QuickBooks. All right, so we have this sitting here. We have all of these different clients and what they are, what they actually owe. This may be accurate, this may be not. This is actually the aging summary. But this shows here what is current. This is 30 days behind, 30 days or more, 60 days or more, 90 days or more. This shows that this has actually been credited and just not applied. So there may be an invoice that amount was never applied to. We'll have to go back and check. But seeing this 91 and over is not good. You do not want your clients to ever have to be sitting in 91 and over. And I've actually talked to this client about it, and in House Call Pro, which is the software that they use, they're like, oh no, the amount we owe is probably, or the amount that we're owed is probably about $2,000. So obviously whoever was taking care of this wasn't actually recording the payments properly and recording the deposits to the correct invoices and what have you. So there is a whole situation going on here. Same thing though, you want to make sure you're not behind on your accounts payable with your vendors, because if that's the case, then they will come after you and they will get creditors involved, and then you could have just owed $1,000, and then now that you have a credit or a debt collector, now that's a $4,000 thing. It may not be that drastic, but I have actually seen clients that were unable to pay or just didn't pay, and the person who was supposed to be taking care of their accounts payable didn't, for whatever reason. It went beyond the point of no return, and then debt collectors got involved, and a $16,000 bill went up to a $22,000 bill. So you want to make sure that your clients are not having to take the hit for that. So make sure that all this information is correct. Alrighty guys, well that's going to go ahead and do it for this video. I hope that this was informative and helped you out. Please leave me a comment of something that you would like me to go over. Sorry, it's been a while since I posted, but if you like this, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing and sharing this content if you feel like someone else may find it valuable. If you're interested in becoming a bookkeeper or just learning how to start a bookkeeping business, literally from square one of coming up with your business name all the way to how to run QuickBooks, learn some of this information, the basics, assets, liabilities, equity, all that good stuff, then I do have a Bookkeeping Academy and I have availability. So if you're interested in that, please click the link in the description or message me, whatever you want to do. So anyways, I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Thanks. Bye.